Lou, as a criminal defense attorney, how would you defend Nick Reiner?
The obvious play is going to be not guilty by reason of insanity. It's not easy to prove, though.
To the public, Rob Reiner and Michele Singer's 36-year marriage seemed picture-perfect. The kind of timeless love you only see in old movies. Every photo, every red carpet appearance painted them as unshakable. A couple untouched by chaos or heartbreak. People believed their bond could outlast anything life threw at them. But behind that flawless image, something much heavier was brewing. Because sometimes silence doesn't mean peace. It hides years of pain no one talks about. In Rob Reiner's final CBS interview filmed just before their heartbreaking departure, the truth could no longer stay buried. Behind closed doors were countless arguments, sleepless nights filled with worry over their son Nick's addiction, and moments when their marriage nearly collapsed. The illusion of calm was shattered, exposing the raw emotions that had been hidden for decades. They didn't hold on because everything was easy. They held on because of their children, because walking away meant tearing the only family they had left apart. That love became their anchor, even as exhaustion consumed them both. And then, in a cruel twist no one saw coming, tragedy struck suddenly and coldly, freezing their story in time forever. When CBS captured Rob Reiner's final appearance, the world saw not a Hollywood legend, but a fragile man whose spirit seemed worn from years of quiet endurance. His face, marked by deep lines and sorrow, told more truth than any interview could. Under the harsh studio lights, it was clear this wasn't the image of fame or power, but of a man who had given everything to love and lost almost all of it in return. Gone was the calm, confident man the public once knew. In his place sat someone utterly worn down, his voice trembling with the exhaustion of a lifetime of pain. The crew on set didn't know it then. You have to prove that his son did not know the difference between right and wrong during the commission of the crime. And that takes experts forensics. You look at all the data, social media, emails, and text messaging and so forth to see if in fact the person did not know the difference between right and wrong. But they were witnessing what would become Rob Reiner's final confession. A moment frozen in time. He made it clear right away. He wasn't there to promote a new project or celebrate his legacy. "I'm here," he said quietly, "because it's time to tell the truth, especially about my family." He talked about his home, that famous glowing house often featured in magazines as a picture of success and stability. But behind those bright walls, Rob said, lived years of silence so heavy it became unbearable. There were long stretches where words stopped, where love became quiet, and where presence turned into absence. He admitted there were times he was so consumed by directing, writing, and chasing artistic perfection that he didn't see what was right in front of him. Michele fading away piece by piece into her own world of distance and solitude. "I thought silence meant peace," he reflected painfully. "But later, I realized silence can also mean abandonment." Those words hit everyone in the studio like a shockwave. Rob went on to recall the moment his world shifted when he met Michele Singer on the set of When Harry Met Sally back in 1989. He said she changed everything. The movie's original ending had been tragic, mirroring his own heartbreak after divorcing Penny Marshall. But when Michele, a radiant young photographer visiting her friend, cinematographer Barry Sonnenfeld, he's walked onto that set. Something clicked deep inside him. Rob said, smiling faintly. "Barry looked at me and said, 'You're not going to marry Michelle Pfeiffer. You're going to marry my friend Michele Singer.' And he was absolutely right." Before Michele, Rob said he always felt incomplete. He made successful films, yes, but he felt like he was only living half a life. "When I met Michele," he once admitted, "I realized this is what real love feels like. It's not often prevailed upon, and even when it is successful, the person doesn't just walk away, they end up being in a state hospital for most of the duration of their life." LAPD Chief McDonald said that they're not sure if the murders were conducted on Saturday night or Sunday, saying that timing could impact how the case is prosecuted. Why does that timing matter in prosecuting the case? That feeling inspired him to rewrite When Harry Met Sally's ending, turning heartbreak into hope, letting Harry and Sally reunite on New Year's Eve just as he and Michele had found each other. Just months later, they got married in Hawaii in a small, spontaneous ceremony with only 2 strangers as witnesses. "We weren't just husband and wife," Rob said proudly. "We were partners. She made me whole." But what no one realized then was that even as their story looked perfect, the cracks had already begun to form. The very moment they felt most complete was the same moment they started to drift apart. Quietly, slowly, and with an ache that only grew heavier with time. That was when Rob began to open up about the little everyday things that made his marriage to Michele so real. He laughed softly as he described how different they were when it came to parenting their 3 kids. "I was the soft one, the spoiler." He said Michele was the one who kept things in order. And maybe that was why their home stayed balanced for so long. Because where Rob's warmth overflowed, Michele's discipline kept everything grounded. But even beyond love and marriage, Michele was his muse, the heartbeat behind his best work, the calm in his storms, the quiet voice that reminded him who he really was. "Without Michele," Rob said, his eyes distant, "I don't know who I would have become." And when the conversation shifted to fatherhood, the emotion in his voice deepened. For all his success in Hollywood, Rob said the greatest joy of his life wasn't directing hit films. It was holding his children for the first time. "I think it goes to the extent of deliberation and calculation by the defendant. The later in time that this murder occurred from when the initial fight was the more deliberate and calculated the actual act was which would then back up the special circumstances murder which requires premeditation and planning." He described the weight of a newborn on his chest, that tiny heartbeat against his, and how he made a silent promise that no matter how cruel the world could get, he would always be their safe place. His love wasn't loud or showy, but it was carved deep like something eternal that could never fade. But over time, that peaceful balance began to crumble. The moment everything started slipping was when his son Nick, once the family's brightest light, began to change. Rob's voice cracked as he remembered those early signs. Nick coming home late. The faint smell of smoke. The distant eyes that no longer met his. "I saw it," Rob said quietly. "But I told myself it was just teenage mood swings." Then came the money requests. Small at first for movies or hanging out with friends, then bigger and more frequent. Soon the reasons stopped coming altogether. Behind closed doors, Rob and Michele argued in whispers, trying to stay calm so Nick wouldn't hear. "Maybe we should stop helping," Michele urged one night, but Rob couldn't do it. "He's our son," he insisted. "He needs us." What he didn't realize was that the line between love and enabling was slowly disappearing. Their home, once filled with laughter, started to feel like a war zone. Rob recalled the darkest moments, nights when Nick would bang on their door, shouting in a voice that didn't sound like him anymore. Once he pushed Rob against the wall while Michele stood frozen, too afraid to move. "I didn't see my child," Rob said, his voice breaking. "I saw a stranger wearing my son's face." When the interviewer asked why he never called the police, Rob lowered his head and whispered, "Because I'm a father." He admitted he was terrified. Terrified that one call could destroy Nick's future. That the media would twist the story. That the world would brand his son forever. But deep down, Rob knew the hardest truth of all. That love alone, no matter how fierce, sometimes just isn't enough to save someone you'd give your life for. There were nights when everything fell apart behind closed doors. Nick would lash out, storm off, and leave the house in chaos. The silence that followed was almost louder than the shouting. Rob said the hardest part wasn't the violence or the damage. It was the heartbreak of still opening the door afterward, of still hoping that this time would be different. When he came back asking for money, Rob whispered, "I knew I was being used, but if I refused, I'd lose him completely." He called it the deepest kind of betrayal, one that breaks a parent's heart in slow motion. "Our son betrayed us," Rob said. "But we betrayed ourselves, too, because we didn't have the strength to say stop." He admitted that fear and denial replaced confrontation. Instead of asking for help, he chose silence. A silence that became its own kind of prison. Still, Rob said he never stopped loving Nick. "Even when he scared me," he confessed, "I still saw the little boy who once needed me." That love was both his comfort and his curse. A light that guided him and a chain that held him down. But that same love began to pull the family apart. The more Rob and Michele tried to protect their child, the more distant they became from each other. The laughter that once filled their home turned into awkward quiets, side glances, and long nights spent talking in circles. No one could pinpoint the exact moment they stopped being a team, but they both felt it. A slow drift that came from years of exhaustion and heartbreak. It didn't explode, it faded. Until love, once their greatest strength, became the reason for their battles. Rob said what wore him down the most wasn't public judgment. It was the illusion. People see the pictures. He said softly. The smiles, the parties, they think that's real. But behind those doors, it was anything but peaceful. So many nights were spent in silence after fights that left no words worth saying. Every argument came back to one subject, the children. Not because of hate, but because of love expressed in two completely different ways. Michele wanted structure and boundaries. She wanted Nick to face reality. Rob just wanted his children close, no matter the cost. "We can't live like this anymore," Michele said one night. Rob stayed quiet, terrified that anything he said would push her away further. Sometimes their arguments weren't shouting matches. They were whispered confessions in the kitchen at midnight. Michele once asked, "Are you protecting our child or your idea of being a good father?" Rob's answer was barely audible. "If I let go, I lose him." That one sentence widened the distance between them forever. Things escalated after one terrible night when Nick caused serious trouble. Michele, shaking with rage and heartbreak, grabbed the phone and said, "I'm calling the police." Rob stepped in front of her, pleading, "Don't, please. He's our son," his voice cracked. Michele burst into tears, not from fear, but from exhaustion. "You're choosing him," she said, "and leaving me behind." Her words hung heavy in the air. Rob couldn't deny it. "I love you," he whispered. "But I love our child too. I don't know how to keep from losing you both." That night almost ended everything. Divorce papers were mentioned, suitcases came out, then went back in the closet. Rob said it was the first time he truly believed their family might not survive. Not from lack of love, but from too much of it, pulling in opposite directions. "We didn't fight over fame or money," he said. "We fought over the children we loved more than anything." Michele wanted accountability. Rob wanted protection. "I couldn't bear to see my son in handcuffs," he admitted. Michele's reply was ice cold. "And I can't live in fear anymore." Both of them were right, and that's what made it so painful. Rob confessed that he chose silence over truth, hoping to hold the family together. "Maybe," he said quietly, "I was just prolonging the pain." Those arguments didn't break them overnight. They eroded them slowly, drop by drop, like water carving into stone. People still believed in the image of their perfect family. But Rob said the truth was far more complicated. "Happiness doesn't mean there are no cracks," he said softly. "It means seeing the cracks and still trying to stay." Then he paused, his voice fading into a whisper. "But there are prices, and I don't know if we paid them the right way." And it wasn't just Nick. Their other children, Jake and Romy, had their own silent struggles. The kind that never made headlines. When Rob talked about them, his voice carried a quieter kind of sadness. Not dramatic, but steady, like a wound that never healed. He said Jake grew up in comfort. Maybe too much comfort. "He never had to worry about anything," Rob explained. "He's smart, but not driven. Every time I thought he'd take responsibility, he'd find another excuse. Not ready, not the right time. The world's too hard." Rob sighed and admitted he always gave in. "I kept saying he'd grow up eventually." Romy was different. Ambitious, outspoken, and used to getting her way. What started as simple requests turned into constant financial dependence. At first, it was small things, Rob said. Then it became rent, then temporary loans that were never paid back. Michele's eyes often said what her lips didn't, that something was slipping away. Rob would just sigh and say, "She's our daughter." Their Brentwood home, once a sanctuary, became a symbol of everything complicated about love and family. When Romy said she didn't feel safe living far away, Rob melted instantly. She didn't ask, she demanded a house next door, private, elegant, comfortable. Michele was furious. "Are we helping her or hurting her?" she asked. Rob had no answer. Just guilt. In the end, he gave in. "I couldn't stand the thought of my daughter feeling unhappy," he admitted. Jake stayed, too, caught in the same cycle. The house grew quieter, more comfortable, and somehow emptier. We'd sit at dinner, and no one would talk, Rob said. I'd look at my children and wonder, do they even want their own lives? But the thing that broke him most wasn't their dependence. It was the sadness in Michele's eyes. She never yelled. She just whispered, "Once, we're running out." Rob never asked if she meant money or faith. He already knew. He said he'd chosen the easy path. Giving instead of guiding, pleasing instead of parenting. I was so afraid of losing my children, Rob admitted. But in the end, I lost myself. Every demand, every withdrawal chipped away at him. Yet, he couldn't stop. When the interviewer asked if he regretted it, Rob went silent. Finally, he nodded. "I regret thinking I had time," he said. "Families don't fall apart because of one big tragedy. They fall apart because of thousands of small moments we let slip away." Then, for the first time, he looked directly into the camera, his eyes heavy but clear, and spoke like he was talking to Michele herself. His voice dropped to a whisper. "If you're watching, I understand now. I just understood a little too late." Those were Rob Reiner's final words before the studio fell completely silent. Not a sound was heard, not from the crew, not from the cameras. That silence was heavier than any music could ever be. When the interview ended, no one realized it would become Rob's final appearance before the world said goodbye to him forever. After his passing, CBS News re-aired the full conversation as a memorial special. Uncut, raw, and deeply human. No flashy narration, no added emotion, just Rob sitting there under the cold studio lights, frail but sincere, with the words, "A storyteller, a husband, a father," appearing softly on the screen. Near the end of that broadcast, CBS included a behind-the-scenes clip never shown before. Rob turned to the interviewer and quietly asked, "Do you think my family will be happy?" The man hesitated, then replied, "Happiness will come soon." Rob nodded slowly, closing his eyes as though he was finally letting go of a weight he'd carried his entire life. When that memorial aired, the world stopped to listen. Viewers weren't watching out of curiosity. They were stunned. Rob and Michele had always been seen as Hollywood's model couple, intelligent, loving, grounded. To see the truth behind the curtain, the pain that had been hiding behind smiles and red carpet photos, was a shock that left millions speechless. Many admitted they couldn't even finish the video in one sitting. It wasn't overly dramatic. It was too real. The way Rob spoke about fear, silence, and those years of avoiding the truth struck a deep chord. He didn't sound like a celebrity. He sounded like a father at war with himself. Viewers realized something haunting. Sometimes tragedy doesn't come from strangers. It grows inside the very homes we think are safest. The media called it a final confession, but to many, it felt like a quiet cry for help that arrived too late. Rob's calm tone made it even more chilling. A man too tired to scream, too used to the pain to even fight it anymore. And then came that fateful day, the 14th, just a month after the interview. The news hit like an electric shock. The same family everyone thought had finally found peace was suddenly gone. Rob and Michele were found lifeless inside their own home. But what stunned the world even more was what came next. Their son, Nick Reiner, the same child Rob had spent his life trying to protect, was the one responsible for the devastating act. Everything Rob had feared, everything he'd tried so hard to prevent, had come true in the most heartbreaking way imaginable. The silence he had chosen out of love had turned into the very thing that destroyed them all. His words from the interview echoed like a ghost. "I was just afraid of losing my child." When CBS replayed that same footage, people couldn't hold back tears. Every word now sounded like a farewell, like a man unknowingly leaving behind his final message. If there were still time, he had said, and audiences everywhere down. The time had been there, but no one had dared to face the truth in time. After that, the public's perception changed completely. The perfect family photo was no longer inspiring. It was haunting. People began to ask themselves how many other homes were living the same story, smiling for the world while crumbling in silence behind the walls. The most terrifying part wasn't the act that ended it all, but the years leading up to it. The quiet, suffocating years when love, fear, and denial became tangled beyond repair. Rob Reiner's love for his son had been unconditional. Too unconditional. It blinded him, trapped him, and in the end destroyed everything he held dear. His story became more than a headline. It became a modern tragedy. One that left a chilling reminder about what happens when love has no limits, when silence becomes protection, and when help comes too late. But to truly understand the heartbreak, we have to look at where it all began with Michele herself. Who was the woman who once stood at the heart of that family? Michele Singer Reiner, born March 3, 1955 in New York City, wasn't just the wife of a Hollywood icon. She was a celebrated photographer, film producer, and social activist with a life full of her own stories. Raised in a warm Jewish family on the Upper East Side of Manhattan, Michele carried the kind of grace that came from both creativity and quiet strength. The same strength that would one day hold her family together when everything else began to fall apart. Michele Singer Reiner's story began long before Hollywood lights ever touched her name. Her mother, Nicole Bernheim Alight, was a Holocaust survivor, a woman who escaped the death march from Auschwitz in 1944 and rebuilt her life from ashes. That story of unimaginable strength shaped Michele's entire soul. It lit a fire inside her, a passion for justice, for truth, and for standing up when silence became dangerous. From childhood, Michele carried that courage proudly. She was fluent in French and Spanish, and while studying at the School of Visual Arts in New York, her love for photography became her calling. Her early years weren't glamorous. She started as a quiet photographer's assistant, carrying heavy equipment, fixing lights, and watching others take the spotlight. But that's where she mastered her gift. The art of observing people, seeing what they tried to hide behind perfect smiles and confident faces. Soon, her camera lens became her voice. Michele's freelance work caught the eye of Fortune magazine, and by the mid-1980s, she was shooting portraits that defined an era. In 1987, she photographed the cover for The Art of the Deal, a job she would later describe as regrettable. Still, her work made her a respected name in photography, capturing both beauty and truth through her lens. Then, fate stepped in. In 1989, while visiting her friend Barry Sonnenfeld on the set of When Harry Met Sally, Michele met director Rob Reiner, and in that moment, everything changed. Rob, newly single after his divorce, saw her from across the set and couldn't look away. Barry joked, "You're not going to marry Michelle Pfeiffer. You're going to marry my friend Michele Singer." And unbelievably, he was right. Their love story moved fast, and within months, Rob and Michele were married in Hawaii in a small private ceremony with only 2 strangers as witnesses. One elderly woman even complimented Rob on the Princess Bride that day. A sweet, spontaneous moment that symbolized the simplicity of their love. Michele didn't just enter Rob's life, she transformed it. Her presence changed even the ending of When Harry Met Sally. The film was originally written with a sad ending, but after falling in love with Michele, Rob rewrote it so that Harry and Sally found each other again just as he had found her. For the next 36 years, Rob and Michele became one of Hollywood's most admired couples. Not just husband and wife, but creative partners, activists, and best friends. Together, they raised 3 children. Jake, born in 1991, Nick, born in 1993, and Romy, born in 1997. Behind the camera and beyond it, Michele was the flame that kept Rob inspired. He often said she was the driving force behind everything they did. Her career continued to rise. She co-founded Reiner Light and served as co-chair of Castle Rock Entertainment, producing films like Shock and Awe 2017, Albert Brooks' Defending My Life 2023 Ray, which earned an Emmy nomination, and God and Country 2024. She even worked on Spinal Tap 2 set for 2025. In 2020, she and Rob signed a major deal with Warner Brothers Television, solidifying their influence as both artists and storytellers with purpose. Michele wasn't just a creative powerhouse. She was an activist with a heart of steel. She co-founded the American Foundation for Equal Rights, which played a key role in overturning Proposition 8 and helping legalize same-sex marriage across the United States. She fought for early childhood education, supported increasing tobacco taxes to fund schools, and worked closely with the Innocence Project to free the wrongfully convicted. Wherever she saw injustice, Michele showed up and fought with everything she had. Rob once said with pride, "Michele is the force behind everything we do. She wants to end injustice." He often called her his true north, the person who reminded him what really mattered. "When I met her," Rob said in one interview, "I finally understood what real love feels like." She made me whole. Michele herself echoed that sentiment in a 2022 podcast. It just felt right, she said. We fell in love instantly and never looked back. Friends described her as brilliant, compassionate, and endlessly driven. A woman who balanced creativity and conscience like few could. Together, she and Rob built a partnership that became legendary. Built not on fame, but on purpose. But on December 14, 2025, that love story came to a heartbreaking end. Michele and Rob were found lifeless in their Brentwood home, an event that sent shockwaves through Hollywood and far beyond. Their son Nick Reiner was arrested and charged in connection with their passing. The tragedy left an aching silence in the entertainment world, and in the hearts of those who had believed in the Reiners as a symbol of strength and compassion. When CBS re-aired Rob's interview after their loss, it hit harder than anyone could have imagined. Viewers didn't just see a director or a legend. They saw a man who had spent his life trying to hold his family together, even when the cracks were too deep to fix. What he said in that interview no longer felt like reflection. It sounded like a farewell written in real time. Those final words became a mirror for everyone watching, forcing people to confront the painful truth that behind perfect smiles, many families are quietly falling apart. Rob and Michele's story wasn't meant to shock. It was meant to open eyes. It reminded the world that love without boundaries or honesty can slowly turn into the very thing that destroys what it's trying to protect. And that's the heartbreaking part. Rob didn't speak out for sympathy. He spoke out because he couldn't bear to let silence win anymore. He wanted people to see the truth, even if it came too late. So, here's the question he leaves behind, one that lingers long after the screen fades to black. If you were in his place, how far would you go to protect the people you love? When does protection become indulgence? When does silence turn into complicity? And most haunting of all, can love by itself really save someone who doesn't want to be saved? If you've got your own thoughts or experiences that echo any part of this story, drop them in the comments below. Your voice matters. Don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and share this video to keep these conversations alive, because somewhere out there, someone might need to hear it, too. See you in the next one where we keep uncovering the truths people are too afraid to.